The rain outside whispered against the window pane, a faint, endless rhythm that filled the silence of the house. The babysitter sat curled up on the couch, her phone lighting her face in soft blue hues. It was her first night watching over baby Oliver, and though the parents had been kind, she couldn't help the uneasy flutter in her stomach. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. The kind of silence that feels wrong. The kind that makes every sound, every breath, every creak feel intentional. She brushed it off as nerves. Everyone gets jittery the first time they're alone in someone else's house, right? The baby monitor beside her glowed with a faint green light, steady and reassuring. She stared at it for a moment, listening to the faint static hum. Nothing, just quiet. She exhaled and turned her eyes back to her phone, scrolling aimlessly, trying to keep herself distracted. But then a sound, soft, distant, like a giggle. She froze. Her thumb hovered over the screen, not scrolling, not breathing. She glanced at the monitor again. The light was flickering now, cutting in and out like a pulse. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice catching. Nothing. The giggle came again, this time clearer, closer. She stood, the wooden floor cold beneath her socks, and strained to listen. The monitor hissed with low static. Then, a voice, muffled, drawn out, almost playful. "Here," it said, drawn through layers of distortion, but it was unmistakably human. Her heartbeat stuttered. Her mind raced with explanations. Interference, cross signals, maybe a neighbor's monitor picking up nearby. But deep down, she already knew this wasn't interference. Her hand trembled as she lifted the monitor closer to her ear. Through the static, she heard something else. The sound of footsteps. Slow. Dragging. From the baby's room. Every instinct screamed at her to stay where she was, to call someone, but something stronger, some terrible need to know, pulled her toward the stairs. Each step creaked beneath her weight, each one louder than the last. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen. At the top of the stairs, she hesitated. The baby's door was half open. A strip of pale light fell across the carpet. She could see the crib from where she stood. Oliver was asleep, his chest rising and falling peacefully. But the baby monitor in her hand still whispered with faint static, and beneath it, a faint breath. Not hers, not the baby's. Something slow and deliberate. The kind of breath you hear when someone's hiding. She stepped inside, careful not to wake him. The air was colder here. She could smell dust and something faintly metallic. The sound was louder now, directly behind her. She turned. Nothing but shadows, the rocking chair, the dresser, the half-open closet. She stared at the closet for a long time, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then the monitor spoke again. "Turn around." Her body locked. The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It was clear, a whisper right against her ear, even though the monitor was across the room. She turned, every nerve on fire, and for a split second, she saw movement. Something slipping behind the closet door. She rushed forward and threw it open. Empty. Only coats swaying slightly, as if disturbed. Her breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. She stepped back, trying to calm herself, when the monitor crackled again. But this time it wasn't static. It was her own voice. "Oliver?" It repeated in her tone, from minutes earlier. Then it laughed, the same soft giggle she'd heard before. The baby stirred, beginning to cry. She scooped him up, trying to comfort him. But when she turned toward the door, her reflection in the window didn't move. It just stood there, smiling back at her. The lights flickered. The monitor dropped from her hand, landing face down on the floor. Through the speaker came one last whisper, calm and certain, "I'm right here," and then silence. That was the night she stopped babysitting. The police later found the monitor still on, light flickering faintly. The last recording captured her voice, soft, frightened, whispering to someone unseen. But she was never seen again. That was just the first story. And they only get worse. They say every babysitter's nightmare begins the same way, with a normal night. A warm greeting at the door, a quick rundown of bedtime routines, a polite smile, and then silence as the parents drive away. What happens next is supposed to be ordinary. But what if it isn't? What if the moment the headlights fade, something else wakes up inside that house? Babysitting has always been seen as harmless. A part-time job, a rite of passage, a symbol of trust. Parents hand over their home, their child, their peace of mind, all to a stranger with a calm voice and a gentle smile. But trust is fragile, cracks in silence. It breaks in whispers, and sometimes it disappears in the blink of an eye. These stories aren't just about fear. They're about the moment innocence collapses, when comfort turns into chaos, when something unexplainable steps quietly out of the dark. The world of babysitting is built on two assumptions: that the house is safe, and that the night will end the same way it began. But what if those assumptions are lies? What if the house itself is listening? What if the night doesn't want to end at all? The stories you're about to hear aren't fiction. They're not twisted campfire tales or internet myths. These are real accounts, messages, calls, and testimonies collected from those who lived to tell them. Each one begins with a simple promise: "I'll be fine." Each one ends with silence. Imagine it. A house you don't belong to, walls filled with pictures of people you've never met. The hum of a refrigerator becomes the only sound keeping you company. The baby monitor whispers like it's breathing. The floorboards know your weight, your rhythm, your fear. The air changes when you're alone. It learns your heartbeat. And sometimes, when you think you're alone, something else is already watching. For most, these stories fade into nightmares, things that feel distant once morning comes. But for others, the night doesn't let go. Some babysitters can't enter a dark house again. Some still hear that same faint cry from an empty crib. And a few never made it home at all. Tonight, we'll walk through their memories. 10 nights that changed everything. Each story will take you deeper, from the familiar warmth of suburban calm to the places where logic dissolves and something unspeakable waits just beyond the doorway. Some stories will shake you. Others will break your heart. All of them will remind you that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones that hide behind ordinary things. A door, a curtain, a smile. So turn off the lights. Let the world outside fall away. Listen closely. Every sound you hear could be part of the story. Every creak could be a step closer to the truth. These are 10 true babysitting horror stories, and each one carries a scar that never healed. This isn't a list of ghost tales. It's a descent. A slow unraveling of what happens when comfort becomes a trap. And if you think you'd never be the one caught in it, remember, every babysitter thought the same thing. Every one of them started the night believing it was just a job. Now it's your turn to sit in the dark and hear what they heard. The first story begins with a girl named Rachel. A normal home, a sleeping baby, and a reflection that didn't move when she did. The drive to Pine Hollow Road felt longer than it should have been. Rachel kept glancing at the GPS, the glowing blue arrow inching its way along a narrow, twisting route through thick trees. The kind of road that seemed to pull her deeper into nowhere. The sun had already begun to sink, washing the sky in gold and gray, and the forest swallowed the last traces of light. She'd taken babysitting jobs before, neighbors, family friends, the usual, but this one was different. The text message from Mrs. Holloway had come through that morning. "We'll be gone until after midnight. It's an easy job, just one baby. He's an angel. Pays well." She needed the money, so she said yes. But the moment she saw the house, a subtle unease crept over her. It stood at the edge of the woods, 3 stories tall, clean and cold with enormous windows that caught the dying sunlight like mirrors. The walls gleamed white, but the air around it felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop at the edge of the property, as if the trees didn't dare breathe too close. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and something faintly metallic. Rachel met the Holloways only briefly, a sleek, smiling couple dressed for an evening gala. They spoke quickly, barely looking her in the eye. The mother handed her a list of emergency numbers, then kissed her baby's forehead without warmth. The father mentioned the security cameras, just for peace of mind, and showed her the monitor display on the kitchen wall. 10 small screens showed every corner of the house, all pristine and motionless. When they left, the silence settled like a blanket. Rachel stood in the hallway, clutching her phone. The baby, named Caleb, slept upstairs in a perfectly arranged nursery. Pale walls, a mobile that spun slowly, and a nightlight glowing faintly blue. It was beautiful but sterile, like a photograph of a nursery instead of a real one. She sat in the rocking chair beside the crib, scrolling through her messages, listening to the soft rhythm of the baby's breathing. Then Caleb stirred. His eyes opened, not on her but behind her. His tiny face twisted with quiet distress. His gaze fixed on something just over her shoulder. She turned instantly, heart hammering, but the room was empty. The closet door stood slightly ajar, revealing only neatly hung clothes. She exhaled, smiling to herself. Babies looked at strange things all the time. Shadows, dust motes, nothing. Still, she shut the closet door and whispered, "It's okay, little man. Go back to sleep." An hour later, she was downstairs watching a movie when she heard a thud upstairs. A short, heavy sound, like something had fallen. She froze. Another sound followed, a slow creak of floorboards. She muted the TV. The baby monitor on the table flickered, static whispering through its speaker. She leaned in, straining to hear. For a few seconds, nothing. Then soft breathing. Not a baby's. Deeper. Closer to the microphone. Rachel grabbed her phone and hurried upstairs. The hallway light buzzed faintly as she stepped into the nursery. Caleb was asleep again, completely still. Nothing was out of place. The closet door, however, was open. Why? The clothes inside swayed slightly, as if someone had just moved them. She took a breath and stepped forward. "Hello?" she whispered, half embarrassed at herself. Her voice sounded small in the room. The house creaked again, a slow expansion of wood and silence. She closed the closet door firmly this time and checked the baby monitor on the nightstand. The screen showed the live feed from the crib. Caleb's tiny body curled beneath his blanket. She turned to leave, but then something caught her eye. On the monitor there was movement, a shadow passing across the wall, behind where she stood. She whipped around, nothing. Her reflection stared back from the window, trembling slightly with her breath. She forced a shaky laugh and went back downstairs, deciding not to look at the monitor again. By midnight, she was dozing lightly on the couch. A faint static hiss woke her. The baby monitor light blinked again. A soft voice came through. "He's awake." Rachel sat up. It wasn't Mrs. Holloway's voice. It was quiet, low, unfamiliar. She looked at the screen. The camera showed the nursery. The crib was empty. Her heart stopped. She ran upstairs, shouting Caleb's name. The crib was exactly as before, blanket smooth, untouched. Then she saw him, standing in the corner of the room, facing the wall, motionless. She rushed to him, lifting him into her arms. His body was cold with fear, eyes glassy, still staring at the wall. She turned toward where he'd been looking and saw it, the reflection in the window again. Only this time, the reflection wasn't hers. It was another figure standing behind her, tall and pale, head tilted slightly, watching her. She spun around, but the room was empty. When she looked back at the glass, the figure was gone. Caleb began to cry. Panicking, Rachel ran downstairs, grabbed her phone, and tried to call the Holloways, but the line was dead. The security monitor in the kitchen flickered to life on its own. One of the screens showed the nursery. In the crib, someone was standing, bending over the baby's empty bed. A woman, long hair, dark dress, completely still. Rachel froze. She turned to run for the door, but the reflection on the glass of the front window stopped her cold. The woman was behind her, standing in the same room, visible only in the reflection. The lights went out. When the Holloways returned hours later, they found the baby asleep in the crib, unharmed. The babysitter was gone. Only the cameras had recorded what happened. On the playback at exactly 12:03 a.m., Rachel walks into the nursery, picks up the baby, and turns toward the window. Then she freezes. She slowly lifts her hand toward the glass, touching it. For a moment, the reflection doesn't move. Then both disappear at once. Some say the Holloways moved away a few months later. Others say they still live there, but the cameras remain unplugged. What's certain is this. When investigators recovered the footage, the last frame before static shows Rachel asleep in the rocking chair. Someone else stands over her, head tilted, watching. Naomi never believed in horror stories. She'd heard them all. Campfire tales, creepy babysitter legends, urban myths that started with a friend of a friend. She laughed at them the way people laugh to keep from feeling small. At 19, she was sharp, sarcastic, and too practical for ghosts. But that was before she met the twins on Miller Street. The job was supposed to be easy. Her neighbor, Mrs. Kessler, needed someone to watch her 6-year-old twins, Ava and Ben, while she worked a night shift at the hospital. Naomi had babysat for them once before. Sweet kids, a little strange maybe, with a habit of talking to corners and whispering to their stuffed animals, but harmless. The Kessler house was old, built in the 50s, with squeaky floors, uneven door frames, and that faint smell of dust and lemon cleaner that never really went away. Still, it felt lived in, safe. It started out normal enough. Dinner was mac and cheese, followed by a cartoon marathon. By 9, the twins were tucked in, the nightlight glowing faint amber. Naomi sat in the living room, flipping through her phone, half watching some mindless reality show. The house hummed quietly, the refrigerator, the faint buzz of a street lamp outside, the occasional car passing by. Then she heard it, a soft shuffle upstairs. She froze for a second, listening. The sound came again, like small feet moving across carpet. Ben? Ava? She called. No answer. The monitor on the coffee table stayed silent. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and climbed the stairs, each step groaning beneath her weight. The hallway light flickered as she reached the top. Both kids were in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. She smiled, shaking her head at herself. "Get it together," she muttered, and turned off the hall light. But as she stepped back toward the stairs, Ben spoke, voice small and sleepy. "Don't leave the door open. He doesn't like that." Naomi froze. "Who doesn't?" she asked softly. Ben pointed to the closet. His eyes didn't open, but his tiny finger stayed raised, trembling slightly. "The man in the closet," he said. She laughed under her breath. "Oh yeah? Well, you tell him I pay rent here tonight, not him." But when she looked at the closet door, a chill crept through her spine. It was cracked open, just enough to show a sliver of darkness. She crossed the room, pushing it shut with a firm click. "All clear, champ," she whispered, tucking the blanket around him. He didn't reply. His face looked tense even in sleep. Back downstairs, Naomi tried to shake it off. Kids say weird things, it's part of their charm. But the atmosphere in the house felt heavier now. The air pressed close like the rooms were listening. She turned up the TV more for the sound than the show. At some point, she dozed off. A crash woke her. Her phone slipped from her lap as she sat up, heart racing. The noise had come from upstairs. It wasn't a creak this time, it was loud, deliberate. Furniture moving. Then came a muffled sob. A child's. Naomi bolted up the stairs, 2 at a time. The hallway light was flickering again, weaker now. She reached the twins' room and yanked the door open. Ava was sitting upright in bed, crying silently, pointing at the closet. The door was wide open again. "It's okay. It's okay. I'm here," Naomi said, rushing to her side. But Ava didn't look at her. Her eyes were fixed on the darkness inside the closet. "He was watching us," she whispered. "He said he likes when you talk." Naomi turned toward the closet, her pulse hammering in her ears. The room smelled faintly of old wood and something sour, like damp clothes. She flicked on her phone flashlight and stepped closer. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking despite herself. The beam of light swept across hanging coats, stacked boxes, a shelf of toys, nothing. Then, in the corner, she noticed something that didn't belong. A small vent cover slightly ajar. It was old, rusted, with faint scrape marks around the edges. The air seeping out was cold. Too cold. She knelt down, peering inside. The darkness beyond the grate seemed to breathe. She reached for it, hesitating only a second before pulling the vent open. A gust of stale air hit her face, carrying the smell of mildew and something else. Something human. Behind the vent was a narrow crawl space, lined with insulation and wood beams. Her flashlight barely reached the far end. And then, two eyes reflected the light back at her. Naomi screamed, stumbling backward. The twins started crying. She slammed the vent cover shut and grabbed both children, dragging them out of the room. She called 911 from the hallway, her voice breaking as she explained what she'd seen. The operator told her to stay on the line. It took less than 5 minutes for the police to arrive, but by then, Naomi was trembling on the porch, clutching the twins close. She tried to explain, but the words felt unreal even as she said them. A man in the walls, eyes behind the vent. When the officers searched the house, they found it, a small crawl space connecting the closet vent to the attic. And in it, an old sleeping bag, a half-empty water bottle, and candy wrappers. Someone had been living there, watching, listening. They never caught him. The police found fingerprints, food scraps, and an old flip phone with blurry photos of the kids sleeping, but no trace of the intruder himself. Weeks later, Naomi still couldn't sleep. Every creak, every draft made her heart race. She'd wake in the night certain she could hear someone breathing just beyond the walls. She quit babysitting altogether, but sometimes, she said, she still dreamed of that closet. In the dream, she opens it again. The coats sway, the air smells of rust. And from the darkness, a voice whispers, "Miss me." Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her math homework spread out in front of her, the sound of the television murmuring quietly in the background. The house was calm, comfortably messy in the way homes with small children always are. Scattered toys, half-empty cups, a faint scent of detergent and something sweet. It was her third time babysitting for the Harpers. A friendly couple, nice pay, quiet neighborhood, the kind of job that felt safe. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one as dusk fell, their amber glow bleeding through the curtains. The baby monitor sat beside her on the coffee table, a soft hum of static keeping her company. Upstairs, little Lucy slept peacefully, wrapped tight in her pastel blanket. Emma had checked twice already, partly out of responsibility, partly because she liked watching the tiny rise and fall of the baby's chest. It reminded her of innocence, of calm. The phone rang. It wasn't her cell. It was the landline, an old beige cordless phone that sat in its charger by the kitchen wall. The sound startled her. She hadn't heard a landline ring in years. She stood, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, and answered. "Hello." A moment of silence. Then a faint breath. "Who's this?" she asked again. Still nothing. Then the line clicked, and the call ended. Weird, she thought. Maybe a wrong number. She went back to her homework, though her mind lingered on that empty silence. 10 minutes later, it rang again. She answered quickly this time. "Hello." A man's voice, low and dry, came through the speaker. "Is Lucy awake?" Emma froze. "Who is this?" No response. Then another click. She hung up, her heartbeat fluttering. Maybe a prank. But how would anyone know she was babysitting here? Her first instinct was to call the parents, but she didn't want to sound paranoid. She told herself it was nothing and tried to laugh it off. Kids made prank calls all the time, right? Half an hour passed. She tried to focus on her work, but her eyes kept darting to the phone. Then it rang again. The same number. Unknown. She hesitated before answering. "Is Lucy awake?" The voice was the same, calm, almost kind, but wrong in a way she couldn't describe. Her throat tightened. "Stop calling here," she said, trying to sound brave. "I'm calling the police." Click. She slammed the phone down and unplugged it from the wall. The silence that followed was suffocating. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. She picked up the baby monitor and turned the volume up a little, needing to hear something alive. The soft static filled the room again. Then the monitor crackled. A faint sound came through, slow, steady breathing. It wasn't Lucy's. It was deeper, louder, and it was moving closer to the microphone. Emma's heart stuttered. She stared at the monitor, willing herself not to panic. Maybe interference, she thought. Maybe the monitor picked up another signal from a nearby house. But when she leaned closer, she heard something else beneath the breathing. A voice. "I can see you." She dropped the monitor. Her breath came fast and shallow. For a moment she just stood there, every muscle locked. Then instinct took over. She ran to the stairs and climbed them 2 at a time. The nursery was dark except for the nightlight's soft pink glow. Lucy was still asleep, her tiny fist resting near her cheek. Nothing seemed out of place. Emma exhaled shakily, brushing a hand through her hair. "You're fine," she whispered to herself. "It's fine." Then she noticed the closet door. It was open a few inches. She was certain she'd closed it earlier. She crossed the room slowly, every step heavier than the last. The air inside felt colder. She hesitated, her hand hovering near the doorknob, when suddenly the phone downstairs rang again. The sound cut through the silence like a scream. Emma turned and sprinted back down the stairs. The unplugged landline sat on the counter, ringing. The cord dangled loose, disconnected from the wall. She stared at it, frozen, until the ringing stopped. Then the answering machine light blinked red. One new message. Her trembling finger hit play. Through the crackling speaker came that same calm male voice. "You shouldn't have hung up on me." A pause. Then, "I'm in the house." Emma's scream caught in her throat. She bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, but her hands were slick with sweat. The door wouldn't budge. She turned back toward the kitchen, and that's when she saw it. The basement door slightly open. A faint light glowed from below. Every instinct told her to run, to leave Lucy and get help, but something stronger, some terrible need to protect that baby, kept her rooted. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a metal flashlight, and crept toward the basement stairs. The air grew colder with each step. The smell of dust and earth filled her lungs. Her flashlight beam trembled across the concrete floor. The light flickered, catching glimpses of old furniture, boxes, a washing machine. Then, in the far corner, she saw it. The beige landline phone, identical to the one upstairs, its cord snaking into the wall. She froze. Slowly, she walked toward it, confusion twisting into dread. It was off the hook. The small green light blinked. The phone rang again, loud, shrill, right beside her. Emma screamed and stumbled back. The flashlight fell, clattering against the floor, its beam spinning wildly. She turned to run, but something moved in the shadows behind the furnace. The silhouette of a man. She raced up the stairs, slamming the door behind her. She grabbed Lucy from the crib, holding the child tight against her chest, and ran to the nearest window. The distant wail of sirens echoed through the neighborhood. Someone must have called after hearing her screams. She looked once more at the baby monitor. The screen flickered. The camera feed showed the basement. The same landline. The same shadows. Only now, there was a shape standing in front of the camera, holding something small and rectangular, like a phone. He turned it slowly toward the lens. A voice came through the monitor speaker, calm and close. "You shouldn't have gone down there." The feed cut to static. When the police arrived, the basement phone was still warm. But the line, they discovered, had been dead for years, disconnected when the Harpers moved in. Emma quit babysitting after that night. She never answered another unknown call again. And sometimes, late at night, when her phone rings, she swears she still hears that faint, steady breathing on the other end of the line. Lauren had always been good at pretending she wasn't afraid. Rent was overdue, her car barely ran, and the job boards were empty except for the odd babysitting gig here and there. So when she saw the listing, overnight sitter needed, country home, $250 cash, she didn't hesitate. The couple sounded kind over the phone. The house was a little out of town, but she told herself it would be fine. She'd bring a book, make some tea, and finally catch a full night's pay for one quiet shift. The drive was long and winding, a narrow road cutting through open fields that stretched for miles. The sky was bruised purple with an early moon rising low and heavy. By the time she reached the house, a pale Victorian surrounded by overgrown hedges, the air had cooled into a damp chill. The porch light flickered as she climbed the steps. The couple who greeted her, the Fairbanks, were polite but distant. Mrs. Fairbanks' smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and Mr. Fairbanks spoke in short, clipped sentences. They thanked Lauren for coming, explained the baby was already asleep, and handed her a list of simple instructions. Warm the bottle at 2 a.m. Don't enter the basement, and never remove the baby's sleeping mask. Lauren had paused at that line, her brow furrowing. Sleeping mask? She asked, half laughing. Like, an actual mask? Mrs. Fairbank nodded. It helps him rest, she said quickly, as though reading from a script. He doesn't like the light. Lauren didn't press further. She just nodded and smiled, even as something cold brushed her ribs. When they left, silence swallowed the house. Lauren made herself tea and settled into a worn armchair by the fire, a blanket pulled over her legs. The baby monitor sat beside her, a soft hum of static filling the stillness. Occasionally, she'd hear the baby shift or breathe, but nothing unusual. Hours passed. The grandfather clock ticked like a heartbeat. At 1:57 a.m., the monitor crackled, a faint whimper, then a thin, drawn-out coo that sounded almost melodic. Lauren stood, stretching, and went upstairs to warm the bottle. The nursery door was painted white, a little chipped around the edges. She opened it quietly. The room smelled faintly of milk and lavender powder. The baby's crib stood near the window, the moonlight washing over his small, bundled body. He was wearing a soft cotton cap and a tiny cloth mask that covered the upper half of his face, secured with delicate ribbons. It looked handmade, old-fashioned, something you'd find in a box of antiques. She smiled gently, leaning over the crib. "Hey there, sleepyhead," she whispered. The baby didn't stir. He just breathed, slow and steady. Lauren warmed the bottle in the adjoining bathroom sink, humming softly to herself. When she returned, something about the scene felt off. The mobile above the crib was still spinning even though the air was still. The shadows on the walls looked deeper, darker. She set the bottle down and froze. The baby's hands were no longer at his sides. They were clenched tightly against the blanket. She hadn't noticed them move. A faint rustling came from the corner of the room. The closet door creaked slightly, as though adjusting to a draft. Lauren turned toward it, her pulse quickening. "Hello?" she whispered, half expecting one of the parents to have returned. No answer. She shook her head, trying to laugh off the tension. She reached down to lift the baby, careful not to touch the mask. That's when she heard it. A faint scratching sound, coming from beneath the mask. It was soft, irregular, like fingernails against fabric. The baby stirred, letting out a muffled sigh. Lauren froze, her hands suspended in the air. She watched as the mask moved, not with his breath, but independently. Like something beneath it was shifting. She stumbled back, heart pounding. "It's okay. It's okay," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. The scratching stopped. The house was silent again. Lauren hurried downstairs, trying to calm herself. She poured another cup of tea, hands shaking, and stared into the dark beyond the window. The fields outside were silver with fog. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching from beyond the glass. Then the monitor came to life again. This time it wasn't static. It was a voice, a woman's voice, soft and broken. "You shouldn't have touched it." Lauren dropped the cup. Hot tea splashed across her jeans. She grabbed the monitor and stared at the tiny green light. "Mrs. Fairbank?" she asked, her voice trembling. No response, just the faint hiss of static again. She ran upstairs. The door to the nursery was open wider than before. The room felt colder. The moonlight had shifted, painting everything in an eerie white glow. The baby was sitting upright in the crib. Lauren froze in the doorway. The mask was gone. It lay crumpled on the floor, damp, as though it had been soaking in water. The baby's head tilted slowly toward her, the movement stiff and unnatural. His eyes, if they were eyes, were sunken, black, glistening in the half-light. His mouth opened wider than it should have, a trembling, silent gape that stretched until it wasn't human at all. Lauren screamed and stumbled back into the hallway. The air around her vibrated, the lights flickering violently. She raced down the stairs, nearly tripping, and fumbled for her phone. No signal. The baby monitor, still in her hand, hissed again. Through the static, she heard a soft voice whisper, "Put it back on." She turned, trembling. The sound was coming not from the monitor, but from the living room. The fire she'd left burning was out. And there, sitting in the armchair, was Mrs. Fairbank. Or something wearing her shape. Her head tilted, her smile sharp and too wide. Lauren backed toward the door, but the handle wouldn't move. She looked down at her hand. Her skin was bleeding where she'd gripped it too hard. Behind her, the baby began to cry upstairs. It wasn't a normal cry. It was deeper, layered, as if more than one voice echoed from its throat. Then silence. Lauren turned back to the chair. Empty. The house was still again. When dawn came, the Fairbanks returned home as if nothing had happened. The house was quiet, clean, peaceful. The baby slept in the crib, the mask perfectly tied around his face. The police report noted that Lauren's car was still in the driveway. Her phone was found in the hallway, screen cracked, flashlight still on. Mrs. Fairbank gave only one statement to the authorities. She shouldn't have taken it off.
Jenna didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or urban legends. She was practical, grounded, the kind of person who turned off horror movies halfway through, rolled her eyes, and said, that would never happen. Babysitting, for her, was easy money. She'd been doing it since high school. She could handle a crying toddler or a bad thunderstorm without flinching. But nothing could have prepared her for what waited that night on Hollow Creek Road. The house stood at the edge of the woods, tall and narrow, its paint worn and gray like the sky above. The parents were friendly enough, young, tired, and apologetic about the short notice. "We'll be back before midnight," the father said. "The baby's already asleep. The monitor's right there." Jenna smiled, said she'd be fine, and waved them off as their car disappeared down the gravel drive. She wandered the house for a bit, admiring its rustic charm, creaky floors, a big stone fireplace, the smell of cedar and rain. The baby's name was Noah, only 6 months old. His nursery was small and cozy, decorated with stars and clouds. On the wall above the crib hung an old painting, a forest scene, dark and misty, with something shadowy hidden between the trees. By 10 o'clock, the rain started. A soft drizzle turned into a steady downpour, and thunder rumbled somewhere far away. Jenna made herself some popcorn and curled up on the couch with her phone. The baby monitor sat beside her, screen glowing faintly. Every so often, she'd glance at it, just a blur of shadows and the faint outline of the crib. Everything was fine. At 10:37, she noticed something strange. The monitor flickered. For a split second, the image distorted, and she thought she saw movement, something tall and thin standing beside the crib. Then it was gone. She frowned and leaned closer, tapping the screen. Static. Then the picture returned to normal. Noah slept soundly, one arm tucked beneath his blanket. "Probably interference," she muttered, settling back into the couch. 5 minutes later, a sound came through the monitor. Not crying. Humming. It was soft, almost tender, a woman's voice singing a lullaby she didn't recognize. The tune rose and fell gently, just above a whisper. The kind of melody that could have come from another century. Jenna froze, her heart thudding in her chest. She grabbed the monitor, turning up the volume. The voice was clearer now, almost beautiful, though it carried an ache that made her skin prickle. "Hush, little one, the woods will keep you safe and still, till the dark ones sleep," the voice trailed off. Silence. Jenna stood quickly, her pulse racing. "Hello?" she called up the stairs, half expecting the parents to have returned early. No answer. The only sound was rain hammering the roof. She climbed the stairs slowly, the old wood groaning under her feet. The hallway light flickered as she reached the nursery door. It was open. She was sure she'd closed it earlier. Inside, the air felt colder, like someone had opened a window. Noah was still in his crib, sleeping peacefully. But the painting above the crib, something was different. The forest looked darker, the shadows thicker. And in the place where there had been only trees, Jenna could now see faint outlines of faces, pale, distant, watching. She turned her gaze away, unsettled. She checked the window. But then, out of habit, she whispered, "Good night, little man," before closing the door behind her. Back downstairs, she couldn't shake the melody from her head. It looped softly in her mind, like a song she'd known all her life. She sat back down, trying to distract herself with her phone, but the Wi-Fi had gone out. Then came another sound, the creak of footsteps above her. Slow, deliberate. Her breath caught. The baby monitor came alive again. Not static this time, breathing. A woman's breath. Then, the same lullaby, whispered even closer to the mic. "Hush, little one, the woods will keep you." Jenna dropped the monitor and ran up the stairs. The nursery door was ajar again. She pushed it open, heart pounding. Noah was awake now, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. His blanket had been pulled to the floor. And the painting, she stopped cold. The forest in the painting wasn't just darker now, it had changed. The edges of the frame were wet, like the paint itself was fresh. And in the clearing between the trees, she could see a new shape. A woman in a white dress, standing where the shadows had been. Her head was tilted. Her eyes were hollow. Jenna backed away. "No, no, no," she whispered. Then, from the monitor still in her hand, a whisper. "He's not yours to keep." The room went cold. The lights dimmed until only the faint glow from the monitor illuminated her face. Behind her, Noah began to cry, loud, shrill, terrified. She scooped him up, clutching him tightly, and turned toward the door. It slammed shut. Jenna screamed and tried to wrench it open, but it wouldn't budge. The humming began again, louder, circling her. She spun, searching the shadows. The air rippled as if the room itself were breathing. The woman from the painting stepped forward, pale and translucent, her dress flowing like smoke. Her voice was low now, almost mournful. "You shouldn't have come here, Jenna." "How do you know my name?" she cried. The woman tilted her head, smiling faintly. "We always know their names." The lights went out. Total darkness. The baby's crying stopped instantly. Jenna fumbled for her phone, turned on the flashlight, and gasped. The crib was empty. The air filled with whispers, hundreds of them, coming from everywhere at once. She turned in circles, shouting Noah's name, until her light landed on the painting again. The forest was still there. The faces. The clearing. And in the woman's arms was Noah. His eyes blinked. Slowly, Jenna stumbled backward, sobbing. She dropped the flashlight, and the beam rolled across the floor. The last thing she saw before it went dark was the woman's arm extending out of the canvas, reaching toward her. The next morning, the parents returned to find the house quiet. The front door stood open. The crib was empty. The painting had changed again. The woman was gone, and in her place, deep among the trees, was a second figure, a young girl with wide, terrified eyes, holding a small baby close to her chest.
When Natalie accepted the babysitting job, she told herself it was just another night. Easy cash for a few hours of Netflix and snacks. She'd babysat for the Morgans twice before, and their little boy, Tyler, was a quiet, polite 6-year-old who mostly kept to himself. The parents were warm and friendly, the kind of people who left too much food on the counter and thanked her twice for showing up. The house was clean, bright, modern. Nothing about it suggested the kind of place where bad things happened. But that night, something about it felt heavier. It began subtly. Mr. Morgan's smile seemed strained as he handed her the house key. "You can put Tyler to bed by 8, he said, glancing at his watch. "We'll be back before midnight." Natalie noticed how his wife lingered by the doorway, eyes darting toward the upstairs hallway. Her hand rested lightly on her husband's arm. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just nodded to Natalie, her voice trembling slightly. "If Tyler wakes up, don't let him out of his room." That was strange. but Natalie brushed it off. Kids sleepwalk sometimes. Maybe it was something like that. After the Morgans left, the house grew quiet. Tyler was already in his pajamas, sitting on the couch with a tablet in his lap. He was sweet, polite but distant, answering questions with one-word replies. When she asked if he wanted to watch a movie, he shook his head. "No screens after 7, he said softly, repeating it like a rule. She smiled. "That's a good rule. Your parents are smart." He looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "It's not their rule." She hesitated. "Whose is it, then?" He didn't answer. He just turned and climbed the stairs. The hours ticked by. The house felt too quiet, like the walls were listening. Around 9 o'clock, Natalie curled up on the couch with her phone. The rain had started outside, light at first, then heavier. The lights flickered once, twice, before settling into a dim glow. From upstairs came a faint sound, something like humming. She frowned. Maybe Tyler couldn't sleep. She climbed the stairs and paused at his door. The humming stopped. The room was dark except for the nightlight's faint blue glow. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "You okay?" No response. She opened the door a little wider. Tyler was sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner of the room. His lips moved, whispering something too soft to hear. Natalie's stomach tightened. "Tyler." He blinked slowly and turned toward her. His face was pale, his eyes distant, like he was seeing something behind her. "She's not supposed to see you," he said quietly. The air seemed to thicken. "Who, Tyler?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He just pulled the blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes. Natalie backed out of the room and shut the door. Her hands were shaking. She tried to laugh it off. Kids say weird things all the time. But that voice, the way he'd said she, it stuck in her mind like a splinter. Downstairs, she poured herself a glass of water, trying to focus on the steady patter of rain. But when she turned toward the sink, she saw something in the window's reflection. A shadow moving at the edge of the hallway behind her. She spun around. Nothing. The hall was empty. Her pulse quickened. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the Morgans, when the screen flickered to life on its own. The flashlight turned on, then off, then on again. Then a text appeared across the screen. "Don't look upstairs." Her breath caught. The message had no number, just a blank sender. The baby monitor on the counter crackled, even though there wasn't a baby in the house. Just Tyler. Then a voice came through. A woman's voice. Soft, calm, almost kind. "He told you not to look." The glass slipped from Natalie's hand and shattered. She grabbed the monitor, staring at the static-filled screen. It showed the hallway, empty, dimly lit, the stairway visible in the background. Then, for a brief moment, she saw movement. Something tall, almost skeletal, crawling up the wall like a spider. Then static again. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She ran to the living room and turned on every light, but the bulbs flickered wildly, some burning out with sharp pops. The rain outside had turned to a storm, wind howling through the cracks of the old house. From upstairs came the sound of a door creaking open. "Tyler?" she called. No answer. She grabbed a flashlight and climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath her. At the top, the hallway light buzzed and flickered. Tyler's door stood half open. She pushed it slowly, the beam trembling across the room. The bed was empty. The blanket lay crumpled on the floor, the sheets twisted. She turned toward the closet. The door was slightly ajar, dark inside. "Tyler?" she whispered, her throat tight. Something moved. She stepped closer, her fingers trembling on the doorknob. The smell hit her first, damp, cold, metallic, like wet earth and rust. She pulled the door open, and the flashlight flickered. For a moment, she saw him, Tyler, crouched inside, facing the corner, whispering. His voice was low and rhythmic, almost chanting. "Don't look at her eyes," he murmured. Natalie crouched down. "Tyler, it's me. What's going on?" He turned toward her slowly. His pupils were wide, his face pale and wet with tears. "She's behind you." Her breath hitched. She turned, and for half a second, she thought she saw a figure in the reflection of the mirror across the room. A woman standing tall and still, her long black hair hanging like a curtain, her face white as bone. The reflection blinked. But when Natalie spun around, the room was empty. Tyler screamed. The lights went out. Everything was chaos. The sound of rain, the boys' cries, and the heavy, dragging footsteps that now moved down the hallway. Natalie grabbed Tyler and bolted for the stairs. But when she reached the bottom, the front door was wide open, the storm raging outside. The woman's whisper followed them, echoing from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Why did you look?" Natalie ran out into the rain, clutching Tyler against her chest. The cold bit into her skin, but she didn't stop until she reached the neighbor's porch, pounding on the door. The neighbor, a middle-aged man, opened it, eyes wide at the sight of her, drenched and shaking. He looked at Tyler, then at Natalie, and his face drained of color. "You shouldn't have taken him out of that house," he said. "What?" she gasped. "She doesn't like it when they leave." Behind them, thunder cracked, and when Natalie turned to look, the Morgans' house stood dark and still, its windows glowing faintly from within, as if lit by candles. Through the rain, she thought she saw a figure standing in the upstairs window, tall and thin, watching. The next morning, police searched the house. They found no sign of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. The only strange detail in their report was the child's room. On the wall above the bed, written in faint, wet streaks, were words scrawled by a trembling hand. Kayla almost turned down the job that night. She'd been running on 3 hours of sleep after a brutal week of midterms and a double shift at the diner. But the Johnsons were kind, always paid well, and the thought of a quiet night alone in a big, warm house felt like heaven. Besides, their daughter Lily adored her. A shy, imaginative 7-year-old who loved drawing fairies and telling made-up ghost stories that never quite made sense. It was late October, and the Johnsons' house was dressed for Halloween. Carved pumpkins glowing on the porch, fake cobwebs across the banister, the faint smell of cinnamon candles in every room. Mrs. Johnson gave her the usual rundown. Dinner leftovers in the fridge, no TV after 9, and Lily's bedtime at 8:30. "Oh, and one more thing," she added, hesitating. "If Lily starts talking to someone named Mr. Red, just tell her it's time for bed. Don't engage." Kayla blinked. "Mr. Red." Mrs. Johnson smiled tightly, avoiding her eyes. "It's just a phase. She'll grow out of it." The parents left soon after. The night settled into a soft calm. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint rustle of wind outside. Lily sat at the kitchen table, drawing intently with her crayons. Kayla leaned over her shoulder and smiled. "That's pretty, Lil. Who's that supposed to be?" Lily held up her paper. It was a tall figure drawn in red crayon, long arms, no face. Just a circle filled with deep, rough strokes of red. She grinned, missing a front tooth. "That's Mr. Red. He watches me from the window." Kayla laughed awkwardly. "Creepy. You've got quite an imagination." Lily frowned. "He's real." The way she said it, calm, matter-of-fact, sent a small chill up Kayla's spine. "Well, tell Mr. Red he's not allowed inside tonight. Okay?" she joked, trying to keep her tone light. Lily smiled again, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "He doesn't need to come inside. He's already here." Kayla stared at her, unsure if she'd heard right. But before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Her heart gave a small jump. No one was supposed to be visiting. She peered through the peephole. Empty porch, just the flickering pumpkins in the dark. She opened the door a crack. Nothing. Only the sound of wind sweeping through the trees. "Trick-or-treaters?" she muttered, closing the door and locking it again. When she turned around, Lily wasn't at the table. "Lily?" she called, walking toward the living room. "Hey, no hiding. It's too late for games." The house was silent. Then, from upstairs, she heard laughter. Relieved, she climbed the steps, each creak of the wood echoing through the quiet house. She found Lily in her room, sitting cross-legged on the bed, talking softly to the empty corner. "Lily, who are you talking to?" "Mr. Red," she said simply, still staring at the corner. Kayla frowned, glancing at the wall. There was nothing there. Just a tall mirror reflecting the soft glow of Lily's nightlight. She sighed and knelt beside her. "Okay, sweetheart, it's bedtime. No more imaginary friends tonight, all right?" Lily's eyes finally met hers. "He's not imaginary. He told me your name." Kayla froze. The air in the room felt heavier. "What did you just say?" Lily looked confused by her reaction. "He said your name. He said Kayla's going to stay with us tonight." The words landed like a stone in her chest. She swallowed, forcing a smile. "That's enough, Lil. Get some sleep. Okay?" She tucked the girl under the blankets, turned off the light, and stepped into the hallway, exhaling shakily. She tried to brush it off. Kids said weird things. Maybe she'd overheard her parents mention her name earlier. That was all. Downstairs, she made herself a cup of tea and scrolled aimlessly on her phone. Around 10:30, she heard it. Faint footsteps overhead. She frowned. Lily should have been asleep. She climbed halfway up the stairs and called out, "Lily, you need to be in bed." The footsteps stopped. Then, a moment later, they started again, slower now, heavier. Too heavy for a child. Her pulse quickened. "Mr. Johnson?" she called, hoping maybe they'd come home early. Silence. She crept up the stairs. The hall was dark except for the light spilling from Lily's room. The door was half open. "Lily." She stepped inside. The bed was empty. "Lily." The closet door creaked. Kayla turned slowly. The door was open just enough for a sliver of darkness to show. She took a step forward. "Honey, this isn't funny. Come on out." A small whisper came from inside. "He said you can see him now." Kayla's throat tightened. She reached for the doorknob and froze. In the reflection of the mirror beside the closet, she saw a shape. Tall. Wrong. Its limbs too long. Its skin the same deep, wet red as the crayon strokes. It stood behind her in the reflection, just close enough to touch. The light flickered. The mirror darkened. Kayla spun around. Nothing there. The closet was empty. She turned back, and the mirror was cracked, a jagged fracture running straight through the glass. Her reflection looked warped, distorted, her mouth slightly open, but she wasn't speaking. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket. She pulled it out, heart pounding. A message from an unknown number. "He likes you." She dropped the phone, clattered across the floor. The lights went out. The only glow came from the hallway nightlight, faint and red. The air was thick with the scent of something metallic, like iron. "Lily," she whispered. Then softly, from behind her, "He wants to show you." Kayla turned slowly. Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes glassy, her hand raised, fingers smeared with red crayon. Behind her, the shadow stretched up the wall, impossibly tall, reaching the ceiling. The light bent around it. Kayla grabbed Lily, pulling her close. "We're leaving. Now." She bolted down the stairs, but the house seemed to change. The hallway longer, the air buzzing with low static. The front door stood ahead, slightly ajar. She lunged for it. As she reached it, the door slammed shut. The glass in the nearby window shattered inward, shards flying past her face. She shielded Lily with her arm, her heart hammering in her throat. Then she heard it. A voice, deep and close, right by her ear. "You opened the door for me." The lights blazed white and then nothing. When the Johnsons returned just after midnight, the house was silent. The teacup on the counter was cold, the lights still on. In Lily's room, her drawing book lay open on the bed. On the last page was a new picture. 2 figures drawn in red, a tall man and a young woman holding hands. Between them, a small child with a smile. Lily was asleep under the covers. Kayla was never found. The storm rolled in just after sunset, the kind that made the whole sky bruise purple and gray, lightning flashing like veins across the clouds. The wind howled through the trees and rattled the shutters of the old farmhouse. where 17-year-old Emma sat curled on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. It was her first night babysitting for the Crawfords, a last-minute gig she almost didn't take. Her best friend had warned her about the house, about the rumors. People said it used to belong to a doctor who'd lost his mind after his family disappeared. Emma laughed it off, told herself stories like that always floated around small towns. Still, she couldn't help glancing at the hallway every now and then, where the shadows seemed too thick, too alive. The Crawfords' baby monitor crackled softly beside her, the faint sound of the infant breathing through the static. The Crawfords themselves were hours away, at a charity event, and the storm had knocked out cell service. Emma was alone, except for little Noah, asleep upstairs. She tried to distract herself scrolling through her phone, but the signal kept dropping. Outside, the thunder cracked like splitting wood. A soft thump echoed from upstairs. She froze, lowering the volume of the TV. Another sound followed, a slow, dragging creak, like something being pushed across the floor. The baby monitor hissed, then picked up a faint whimper. Noah. Emma set the blanket aside and stood, her heart thudding. Probably the wind, she whispered, trying to convince herself. But the sound wasn't outside. It was above her. She grabbed her flashlight from the counter. The power had flickered a few times already, and started up the staircase, her footsteps drowned by the thunder. The hall was dim, lit only by flashes of lightning through the window. She reached Noah's door and gently pushed it open. The crib was empty. Emma's stomach dropped. The sheets were rumpled, the mobile above the crib still spinning slowly, its tiny paper stars brushing the air. Noah, she whispered, her voice trembling. She checked the floor, the corners, nothing. Then she noticed the closet door. It was slightly open, a strip of darkness showing. She crossed the room, every instinct screaming at her to run. She placed a hand on the door and whispered, Noah, are you hiding? The baby monitor in her pocket crackled. Then, through the static, a voice that wasn't hers said softly, He's not hiding. Emma stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the walls before settling on the open closet. Inside, there was nothing. Just hanging clothes swaying gently as if something had brushed past them. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed the flashlight and turned to leave, but a faint cry stopped her, from down the hall. She followed it, barefoot, heart hammering. The nursery light flickered as she stepped into the guest room at the end of the corridor. There, in the middle of the bed, lay Noah, perfectly still. His eyes were open, staring up at the ceiling. She rushed forward, scooping him up. Oh my God, Noah! But he wasn't crying. He wasn't moving. His little hand was clutching something, a tuft of long black hair. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the mirror across the room. For just a second, Emma saw a reflection behind her. A woman standing in the corner, head tilted at an impossible angle, her hair falling like a curtain over her face. The image vanished with the next flash. Emma turned, but the corner was empty. Only the whisper of air, the faint smell of damp earth. Her breath came fast and uneven. She ran down the stairs, clutching Noah to her chest. She didn't care if she sounded crazy. She had to get out. She reached the front door, grabbed the handle, and yanked. It didn't move. The lock turned, but the door wouldn't budge, as though someone was holding it shut from the other side. Then came the whisper, right by her ear. Don't take my baby. Emma froze. The sound was female, wet and ragged, like someone who had been crying for hours underwater. She turned slowly. The figure stood halfway down the stairs, the woman from the mirror. Her white nightgown was soaked and clung to her thin frame, her face half hidden behind tangled hair. The skin on her arms was gray, cracked like dried clay. Emma couldn't breathe. She stumbled back, clutching Noah tighter. Please, she managed, voice shaking. Please, I'm just watching him. The woman tilted her head again, the sound of vertebrae popping in the quiet room. You're not his mother. Emma screamed and ran for the back door, fumbling with the latch. The storm outside was raging, rain hammering against the glass. She flung the door open and stepped into the yard, the mud slick beneath her feet. The air smelled of ozone and something else, rot. She didn't stop until she reached the treeline. She ducked behind a trunk, chest heaving, trying to catch her breath. The baby was silent in her arms. Too silent. "Noah?" she whispered, pulling him back to look at his face. The bundle in her arms wasn't Noah anymore. It was a doll porcelain, cracked, its painted eyes staring blankly up at her. A string of wet hair was wrapped around its neck like a noose. Emma dropped it and stumbled backward, a choked sob rising in her throat. She turned toward the house and froze. In the upstairs window, the woman was standing again, holding Noah in her arms, rocking him gently. For the briefest moment, lightning illuminated her face. Sunken eyes, mouth torn into a smile that didn't belong to the living. Then the light went out, and the house went dark. When the Crawfords returned the next morning, the front door was wide open. Muddy footprints led from the kitchen to the yard, disappearing into the woods. In the nursery, Noah slept peacefully in his crib, unharmed. But on the baby monitor, when they replayed the night's recording, they heard something chilling. A woman humming a lullaby, soft and broken, followed by Emma's voice whispering, "Please, let me go," before it cut to static. They never found Emma's body. But for years afterward, new babysitters in that house reported the same thing. During storms, the baby monitor would turn on by itself, and through the static, a young woman's voice would whisper, "Don't take the baby." Outside, in the woods, they say you can sometimes hear it too. That same lullaby drifting through the rain, growing fainter as the storm fades, until there's nothing left but the wind. The final story begins with silence. Not the comforting kind that comes before sleep, but the heavy, suffocating quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound too loud. Mia was a part-time sitter, the kind parents trusted, calm, polite, dependable. That night, she was watching twin boys, both fast asleep upstairs in their shared room. It was close to midnight when she noticed something strange on the baby monitor. A shape moving in the corner of the screen. At first, she thought it was static or a shadow from the curtains, until it stepped closer to the camera. She blinked, frozen. The figure was tall, thin, and wearing what looked like an old rabbit mask. Pale and cracked, one ear missing. It just stood there beside the twins' beds, head tilting slightly, as if watching them breathe. Mia shot up from the couch, her pulse spiking. She ran up the stairs, the monitor clutched in her shaking hand. But when she burst into the boys' room, it was empty. The twins were asleep, undisturbed. The window was closed. Trying to calm herself, she checked every corner, even under the beds. Nothing. When she turned to leave, though, she saw something carved into the wooden door. A rough symbol, like an eye with two lines through it. She didn't remember it being there before. Back downstairs, she tried calling the parents, but the call wouldn't go through. Then the monitor flickered again, this time showing her own reflection, though she wasn't in the room it displayed. She watched in horror as the reflection slowly smiled. The lights went out. Upstairs, a door creaked open, and from the monitor speaker, a soft voice whispered through the static, "It's your turn to watch." The house sat quiet now, the echoes of 10 different stories lingering like ghosts between its walls. Each tale, each disappearance had happened miles apart. Different towns, different faces, different years. Yet something connected them all. The faint whispers on baby monitors. The tall figures outside darkened windows. The soft voice that said your name before the lights went out. Those who'd survived, few as they were, spoke of the same feeling. That they'd been watched long before they ever took the job. Parents stopped hiring babysitters after midnight. Neighborhoods whispered about cursed houses and haunted towns. But the truth was simpler. Evil didn't stay in one place. It followed those who'd seen it, those who'd heard the whispers and tried to forget. Some said the stories were just coincidences, urban legends twisted over time. Others swore the thing in the shadows was still searching, not for the children, but for the ones who'd tried to protect them. And tonight, somewhere, another phone buzzes. Another sitter answers a late-night call. Another child says, "He's watching from the window." The story never ends. It just waits for the next babysitter to come inside.